the shifting landscape in the swing states.
If Congress finally takes action this week, maybe they can get a better image than car salesmen.
And what Americans are most looking forward to about the election. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup Editor-in-Chief.
I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today.
And this is Election Matters. Well, Susan, we're out with our second edition of our swing state polling, where we look in depth at the attitudes of voters in the 12 states that we think are going to be most important, the states that can go either way this year. The bottom line?
Well, a much tougher landscape for Barack Obama this time than it was 4 years ago. The number of people who identify themselves as Democrats has gotten smaller. The number of people who identify themselves as Republicans has gotten bigger. And when you look at a series of key measures like, are you enthusiastic about voting? Are you paying attention to the campaign? Do you think the election outcome will have a lot of consequences? On all of those measures, Republicans rank as more enthusiastic, more engaged than Democrats.
And there's no question that these are key states. Obama won on average in these states, did he not, back in 2008 when he went to victory? But the question is, what can he do this time?
He won all 12 of these states last time by 8 percentage points overall. He needs to get about half their electoral votes this time if he's going to have a second term.
And yet, as you just said, the data are showing it's going to be much more difficult. I mean, when the party ID has collapsed that much, that really suggests that a Democratic candidate's going to have a much tougher road to hoe, so to speak, and when he's going to try to beat the Republican candidate this time.
That's right. Just to put a number on it, last time the party ID numbers favored the Democrats by 11 percentage points. Now that's narrowed to 2 percentage points, which, as you know, is not statistically significant.
We did do head-to-heads in these states, right? We said Obama versus Romney and Obama versus Gingrich. And at the moment, it's close, but the GOP candidate, both of those gentlemen, Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich, have a slight edge over Obama, right?
That's right. And yet, when we look at the national numbers, Barack Obama edges both of them out. So he's in a somewhat better position nationwide than he is in these key states, the states that we think will determine the outcome of the election next year.
And you know, we always say if the election were held today, but you know, Obama's job approval rating's at 43%, and now we're seeing in these swing states he would lose based on these data. So if you put it all together, right now in December of the year before the election, Obama's losing. I think that's what the conclusion is, the election, but a lot can change.
As we've seen with this Republican presidential race, which has been all over the place.
Absolutely. The roller coaster effect where one candidate comes up and then the other. The number one question people ask me, Susan, is will Newt Gingrich fade? Well, so far we're not seeing a lot of fading. As you know, we're tracking it every day. These are among Republican and Republican-leading independents. We started out with Romney down 15 points to Newt Gingrich the first 5 days of December. Romney, he never moves, right? He stayed steady the whole time. Newt Gingrich has been up and down, and now it's a 10-point gap for Gingrich over Romney. So Gingrich is down a little, but clearly he's still significantly in the lead when we ask Republicans nationally who they want to be their nominee.
And he's over 30%. That's higher than any other candidate has gotten so far in this process. Now, it's a 5-day rolling average, so we don't know yet how much impact that Saturday night debate in Iowa might have.
Yeah, of course, after every debate, there's a lot of talk about people trying to parse it, and Romney made the famous wager, right? $10,000. That you're wrong to Rick Perry, and a lot of people say that suggests that's pocket change to him and so on and so forth, but we just don't know. We'll have to wait and see if it's affecting these national numbers. And by the way, our national numbers are, for the most part, except for New Hampshire, mirrored in every state poll you see, are they not?
That's
South
right.
Carolina, Florida?
Well, you do see Mitt Romney holding on to his lead in New Hampshire, although more narrowly so. And you see Gingrich ahead in state polls in Iowa and South Carolina and Florida.
So far what we're seeing nationally is just being translated through. Although people call me up and I say, what happens in South Carolina and Florida, it's totally going to change once people start voting in Iowa and New Hampshire. So we'll see. It's going to be a cascade effect.
Yes.
At least it has been historically.
And in fact, things could change in Iowa. We've got another debate on Thursday in Sioux City. That's the last debate before the Iowa caucuses. There's still time for there to be changes we don't expect even there.
Certainly the history of the Republican sentiments this year have shown things can change. Speaking of things under a time deadline, Congress is still here in Washington trying to do something before it leaves, i.e. a spending bill, among other things which it needs to do. Some signs they might.
Well, the Republican leadership says that there's no question there'll be an extension of that payroll tax break. There's some thought that extended unemployment benefits and some other things will be wrapped up into that bill. They're making progress on a spending bill. So there are some signs that Congress wants to get out of town and needs to do some of these fiscal issues, address some of these fiscal issues before they can do that.
Now, our millions of people watching now are trying to figure out your reference to car salesmen when we introduced Election Matters today. That has to do with perceived honesty and ethical standards of Congress, does it not? Maybe they have a chance to get above car salesmen?
Well, the new Gallup poll has them at the bottom, matching your historic high in terms of professions that have very low reputations in terms of integrity and honesty. Members of Congress below even lobbyists and car salesmen. Journalists, by the way, do pretty well.
Well, of course they should.
Journalists are below funeral directors, but above bankers and lawyers.
You know, once in the past we put posters in there. People ask us that. We don't put them in because we don't want to have a conflict of interest, but I'm sure they'd be very near the top. A car salesman, historically very near the bottom, but now Congress, this is just one of many, many different indications we have of how low the American public its esteem is for Congress. You know, low job approval ratings, confidence in Congress institution, all of them at or near historic lows. And here's another, piece of the puzzle. But maybe if they do something right and get out of town having actually wrapped up some loose ends, their esteem could come up a couple of points.
It might, although Americans still seem to say that most members of Congress don't deserve re-election. That really raises the prospects for
another
turmoil.
historic low, by the way.
That's right, for turmoil in next year's elections.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Well, Susan, we have one last thing to talk about, and that is our love for campaigning. We love to follow elections. We think it's great, right? Because that's, our business.
Yes, that's right. It keeps us employed.
But what's the question we just asked the American public?
Well, we ask, can you not wait for the election to begin, or can you not wait for the election to be over? And what did they tell us?
Well, unfortunately, in the swing states, it was about 3/4 who say they can't wait for the whole thing to be over with. And about 70% of Americans nationally. So it's already kind of a pretest of what Americans think about all of this campaigning and all the coverage and maybe all of the negative ads that come back.
They say they can't wait for it to be over, but we also find that the rate of attention people are paying, those who say they're paying quite a lot of attention to the election, is pretty high. It's much higher than it's been in the last 5 or 6 election cycles. Even a little higher than it was 4 years ago when interest was very high, and of course we had contests going in both parties.
They always tell us, by the way, that they hate negative ads. Respondents do in surveys, never affect me, but they move the numbers, and that's why consultants do negative ads. So maybe it's the same thing. They tell us they don't like election campaigns, but the public secretly likes to watch. It's like a giant football game, right? And the Super Bowl is November
2012.
Absolutely. We'll talk next week. Maybe Congress will have done something by then. I'm Frank Newport, editor-in-chief of the Gallup poll.
I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today.
And this is Election Matters.